good coach is so hard to find.
So hard to choose, tough nut, player's guy, or something in between.
One thing is for sure, though, in the NHL, when you're done, you're done.
Until the next team quickly calls and puts you back in the saddle.
Today on Sportsnet Countdown, NHL head coaches who kept coming back.
You're fired. You're hired. Next on Sportsnet Countdown.
Hey everyone, welcome to Sportsnet Countdown. I'm Ken Reed.
And I'm Ivanka Osnak.
It is one of the oldest cliches in hockey and pro sports, really. Coaches are hired to be fired.
And some of them get fired a lot. But then they get hired a lot.
Yes, some coaches just keep coming back and keep coming back and keep coming back.
Kind of like a cat who has 9 lives. It's the men who keep finding themselves behind the bench. The men who have coached the most NHL teams, comeback coaches in Sportsnet Countdown.
Number 25, Vic Stasiak. When Stasiak became the second coach in Vancouver Canucks history, it would be his third and final NHL gig. On his playing resume, Stasiak has what every coach might take as a bad sign. He was traded by the one and only Jack Adams.
Pass out to Stasiak, who scores at close range.
In between stints as a Red Wing, Stasiak was part of the famous Boston Bruins all-Ukrainian Uke line, alongside Bronco Horvat and Johnny Busen.
Number 24, Craig Ramsey. While playing junior for the Peterborough Petes under coach Roger Nielsen, Craig Ramsey went into the coach's office one day to quit. During their meeting, Nielsen fell asleep, and when he woke up, he calmly told Ramsey to stay, and he agreed. Before his coaching career, Ramsey would be shaped by Nielsen into one of the toughest defensive forwards in the NHL. As a coach, he led 3 teams, the Buffalo Sabres, Philadelphia Flyers, and Atlanta Thrashers.
23, Dick Urban. Imagine the Montreal Canadiens nearing bankruptcy. That's what Coach Dick Urban is said to have saved the team from in the early 1940s, when he took a struggling franchise and filled the form, winning 3 Stanley Cups during his tenure. It didn't hurt that a guy nicknamed the Rocket soon joined his roster either. Irving was the bench boss for 3 clubs: Montreal, the Chicago Blackhawks, and the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Number 22, Bob Berry. When asked what he is most proud of as a coach, Bob Berry says it was the time he put the Triple Crown line of Marcel Dion, Dave Taylor, and Charlie Simmer together on the Los Angeles Kings.
Simmer goes behind the Detroit net. Simmer with it. Kings 81 on the nice over Dion. He scores! What a play!
When the line went out on the power play, players on the bench would blurt out, "Goal coming!" They were more often right than wrong. After his time with the Kings, he went on to lead 3 other clubs, the Montreal Canadiens, Pittsburgh Penguins, and St. Louis Blues.
Oh, he's mad. He went for 2 points. This is the second stick now.
Number 21, Johnny Wilson.
I'll ask Johnny Wilson, what does this team have to do today? He says just outwork Boston. It's simple as that.
Johnny Wilson had homes in different area codes, coaching 14 teams over 14 years, including senior men's hockey, college, AHL, international hockey, and the WHA. As a player, he was part of the package used to move Eddie Shack to the Leafs from the Rangers. Brother Larry also coached in the NHL, and you may have heard of his nephew, Ron.
Number 20, Brian Sutter. When Brian Sutter coached the Boston Bruins, Don Cherry said that if Brian had dressed, he would have been their toughest player. Sutter once said, "When we played, you wanted to beat the crap out of your brother to show your teammates you wanted to win."
I should say major penalty.
As a coach of 4 NHL clubs, he spent plenty of time in the old Chuck Norris division with the Blues for 4 years and the Blackhawks for 3. He also coached the Flames and Bruins.
21. One thing the Wings wanted to do is they wanted to get back on track.
Number 19, Jim Schoenfeld. Schoenfeld may be best known for his altercation with referee Don Koharski, in which he called the ref a fat pig and told him to have another donut. Schoenfeld was the head coach of 4 teams, the Devils, Capitals, Sabres, and Coyotes.
Number 18, Terry Murray. Part of the first pair of sibling coaches in the NHL, Terry Murray twice replaced his brother Brian on the bench. After being swapped as a coach of the LA Kings for Daryl Sutter in 2011 and watching the team then win it all, Terry remains stuck at 499 career wins. Murray was the head coach with 4 organizations, and he currently coaches the Flyers' AHL team, the Phantoms.
Number 17, Jacques Martin. Many remember the playoff struggle Jacques Martin and the Ottawa Senators had with the Toronto Maple Leafs. But few remember that Martin was losing in the playoffs against Toronto long before it was cool, as the bench boss at the St. Louis Blues in 1987. He's also been a head coach in Florida and Montreal. In 2002, while leading Ottawa, he stepped aside for the final 2 games of the season to allow assistant Roger Nielsen to reach 1,000 games coached.
The crowd is standing here in Ottawa, and they're cheering their coach tonight, Roger Nielsen.
Number 16, Ron Wilson. Kids may have been disappointed when they saw that Ron Wilson was the first coach of the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim and not Emilio Estevez. But it was Wilson acting childlike when he got a contract extension over the 2011 Christmas holidays as coach of the Maple Leafs. I got a Red Ryder BB gun and an extension, boasted Wilson on Twitter. He did not tweet about being fired 3 months later. Wilson hasn't had a job since, but he coached the Capitals and Sharks between his tenures with Anaheim and Toronto.
Open his hand and winds up, score.
Now, Ron Wilson is one guy who hasn't resurfaced. You get the odd interview from him, clip, but that's about it since he was let go by the Leafs back in March of 2012.
Maybe he's still stressed out because you know what? Coaching is one stressful gig. This is rather stressful, too. This is a stressful countdown. So we're going to lighten the mood just a little bit with a little, what were you thinking?
Over the glass, and he scoops it up and over. You gotta be pretty strong to do that. Watch this. Norma looks to be shaken up just a little bit. He moves in for the big hit.
We have got our first break coming up on Sportsnet Countdown. Top 15, though, still to come.
Osmac, have you ever been fired from a job? Have you ever told a group of men to get the pucks in D?
No.
Are you in any halls of fame?
No.
Then you have nothing in common with the men we are about to check out in the top 15 when Sportsnet Countdown continues. We are back on Sportsnet Countdown looking at comeback coaches, and there are some legendary names on the list.
That's right. Let's keep this countdown rolling ahead. Number 15, a man who went into the Hall of Fame as a player and could likely go in as a coach as well.
Number 15, Jacques Lemaire. Known for his trap-based coaching style, Lemaire's New Jersey Devils actually scored the second most goals in 1993-94. He was the head coach of the Devils on 2 separate occasions, each time getting pulled back in by the Godfather, Lou Lamoriello. When Lemaire and later Larry Robinson joined the Devils in 1993, Blue Liner Ken Danico said he'd learned more about playing defense in the first 3 days than he had in the last decade. Before his first stop in Jersey, Lemaire led the Canadiens and would later coach the Wild between 2000 and 2009.
Number 14, Mark Crawford. the Cup as coach in 1996 with the Colorado Avalanche, but he may be best known for his infamous involvement in the doomed shootout in Nagano. Reports are that Wayne Gretzky hasn't returned to the NHL because he is still stapled to that bench. That move still baffles many. The well-traveled Crawford spent time as a coach with 4 NHL organizations, including the Canucks, Kings, Stars, and the Nordiques before they moved to Colorado.
Decision strike. A deflected puck en route over the right shoulder of Ole Kolzig, and the Nordiques take a 2-1 lead.
Number 13, John Muckler. Muckler was an assistant coach during the Oilers' dynasty of the 1980s, and he won a cup as their head coach in 1990.
The Edmonton Oilers, Stanley Cup champions, 1990.
But the best team Muckler was ever a part of was the 1987 Canada Cup champion Canadian squad. He was an assistant coach. He called that team the best team ever. Still, his confidence in the Oilers was sky high. As he said, at the start of the 80s, passing the puck the width of the ice in your end zone was a no-no. But we did.
Murphy 1 chance, Murphy 2 chances, and it's in.
Muckler saw time with 4 NHL teams: the Oilers, Minnesota North Stars, Sabres, and Rangers.
Number 12, Peter Laviolette. If you thought Peter Laviolette's firing in 2013 after just 3 games was premature, he's actually tied for 4th in that category. Chicago Blackhawks coach Paul Thompson holds the top spot, having been fired in 1944 after just 1 game, an 11-5 loss to the Maple Leafs.
Peter Laviolette is ticked off.
Flyers GM Paul Holmgren said he had a gut feeling about Laviolette's firing on a plane ride back from a road trip. Less than a month earlier, owner Ed Snyder had told media that he was thrilled to have Laviolette. Laviolette is on his 4th NHL gig with the Nashville Predators. In addition to the Preds and Flyers, he's also coached the Islanders and Hurricanes.
The Carolina Hurricanes turned the page on the Peter Laviolette era and said goodbye to the only coach to bring the Stanley Cup to Carolina.
Number 11, Pat Burns. When Pat Burns was hired in Toronto, he had received calls from other teams as well, namely the LA Kings, who his Leafs would lose to in the 1993 conference final. I wasn't interested in going to practice with sandals on, he told the Toronto media. Burns admitted to not knowing the players well, referring to the recently acquired Doug Gilmour as Daryl. When Gilmour heard about the flub, he joked, "Tell George, no problem." The two had their first meeting at Fillmore's, a Toronto club where Burns was mobbed for autographs. Burns often called the 92-93 Leafs his favorite team. His second, third, and fourth favorite teams would have to be the Canadiens, Bruins, and Devils in no particular order.
Number 10, Ken Hitchcock.
Greatest coach the Stars franchise has ever had.
In his second year as an NHL head coach, Hitchcock led the second-seeded Dallas Stars through a 7-game series with Curtis Joseph and the Edmonton Oilers. In the final moments of overtime in Game 7, Joseph stunned Joe Nieuwendyk by catching a rebound point-blank with Nieuwendyk on the doorstep. Minutes later, Todd Marchand upset the Stars with a breakaway goal. But just 2 years later, Nieuwendyk won the Conn Smythe Trophy, and Ken Hitchcock led the Stars to their first and only Stanley Cup. They beat the Buffalo Sabres by a toe.
The Stanley Cup in me.
He's on his 4th stop now with the Blues. In addition to St. Louis and Dallas, he's also coached in Philadelphia and Columbus.
Number 9, Daryl Sutter. We've all seen Daryl Sutter's one-word answers at press conferences. The man knows the art of saying nothing when nothing is left to say. Take a Jets-Blackhawks game from 1993 as an example. Sutter watched from the Chicago bench as Winnipeg's Nelson Emerson caught a puck out of the air behind Ed Belfour's goal and stuffed it in the net with his hand in overtime. Even after video replay, the referee counted it, and the Hawks bench, including Sutter, stormed the ice in protest. You know what my feelings are, he said. I can't say anything. Ask Sutter about fertilizer and he might talk your ear off. Ask him what the difference in a 2-1 game was and he'll say, 1 goal. Sutter also took his traveling poetry slam through San Jose and Calgary, and he's currently the head coach in LA.
To Kyle Clifford, to Foley, shoots, great save, rebound, they score! Alec Martinez gets the goal! The Los Angeles Kings have won the Stanley Cup!
Number 8, Rick Bowness. Rick Bowness was the Ottawa Senators' first coach, and he promptly led them to a 10-70-4 record and 3 straight last-place finishes. The Senators were suspected of tanking in 1993 in order to land Alexandre Daigle in the draft, but nothing more than a fine was dealt. The coach would later say that Daigle didn't love the game, while the failed first overall pick famously said, "No one remembers number 2." Selected second overall in the same draft, that would be Chris Pronger. Bowness was the bench boss for 5 teams, but also stood as an assistant for 5, and currently is an associate to John Cooper down in Tampa Bay.
Number 7, Paul Maurice. After suffering a serious eye injury while playing in the Ontario Hockey League, Peter Carmanos offered to trade Paul Maurice or give him a coaching job. Maurice would later become the youngest head coach in the NHL at the age of 28 and the youngest coach to reach 1,000 games behind the bench. Even though he'd made the Stanley Cup final with the Carolina Hurricanes in 2002, he called his 07-08 Leafs the most talented team he'd ever coached, adding a guarantee, saying,
"We'll make the playoffs and compete for the Stanley Cup."
And it looks like McCabe who shoots it in his own net.
The Leafs finished 12th in the East. Maurice has been behind the bench in Hart, Carolina, Toronto, Carolina again, and Winnipeg.
Number 6, Brian Murray. For Brian Murray, it's always been about the family. Murray's hockey career has often been tied up with his brother Terry's. In addition to being one of the first brothers to coach together in the NHL while with Washington, Brian, 8 years older, coached Terry as a player in Brian's first year as the Capitals bench boss. Meanwhile, Brian's nephew Tim, now GM of the Buffalo Sabres, followed him through Detroit, Florida, Anaheim, and Ottawa. In total, Brian has coached 5 different teams.
Hey, guess what I get to point out now?
Give it to me.
Nova Scotia content. Rick Bowness coming in at number 8. In fact, he played 173 games in the NHL before he got into coaching.
Every time you mention Nova Scotia, I know you get some money, but I also think, what were you thinking?
Just let me do it. You just stop. Just let me. Okay, I got this. King's just trying to gain territory. Yeah, it skipped once. Watch how high this bounces. It goes right. That's a water bottle goal. Can I get some help from Mike Hassan, our director? Where's the puck? Hey, you talk about rebound control. That's rebound control. Try a little dance right here to shake it loose. Ants in your pants, huh? There it is. Hey, you got it.
Coach, get fired, repeat. That's the theme of today's countdown.
Yeah, comeback coaches, the top 5 on the way. Among them, a guy we used to work with. Were we terrified of him?
He was such a delight.
Or was he? Find out when the countdown continues.
That's a tease. Coaches are hired to be fired. Sure, it's a cliche, but it's a cliche because it's true. You know why the coaches, though, in our countdown keep getting job after job? Because they are that good at their job.
Yeah, it's time for the top 5. And at number 5, we're going to check out the man who was the last man to be the head coach of a Canadian team that actually won a Stanley Cup. Number 5, Jacques Demers.
The Red Wings are an extension of Jacques Demers' personality.
Before the Ken Holland era, Jacques Demers was bringing respect back to the winged wheel. First coach to win back-to-back Jack Adams Award, Demers was the man who named Steve Yzerman captain of Detroit when Yzerman had yet to silence his critics.
Demers had quit hockey when the Montreal Canadiens came calling. Then, at the beginning of the 92-93 season, he told the Habs that they would surprise the world that year and win the Stanley Cup, which they did. In all, he has led 5 teams.
Number 4, Pat Quinn. Everyone remembers Pat Quinn's hit on Bobby Orr in 1969, but you may not have heard of what happened afterwards in an Irish pub in Boston. That night, Quinn walked into a pub to grab some beer for his team on their return trip and realized too late he was in a predicament.
The room went quiet, and he was surrounded 6 deep by Bostonians. Quinn thought this was the end. Hands reached out for him, but only to pat him on the back. Being an Irish Catholic in a Boston pub saved him from God knows what. Having survived that ordeal, Quinn went on to coach 5 clubs over 30 years.
Number 3, Scotty Bowman. The accomplishments of Scotty Bowman are endless, but one stands out as having changed hockey forever. As coach of the expansion St. Louis Blues in the late 60s, his teams beat up the Philadelphia Flyers in consecutive playoffs, prompting Flyers owner Ed Snyder to vow that his teams would never get pushed around again.
His 9 Stanley Cups as a coach are the most in history, his first coming in 1973 and his last in 2002. Toe Blake once told him tired players make mistakes, and afterwards, Bowman became one of the only coaches to have his teams practice line changes, doing so with 5 teams: the Blues, Canadiens, Sabres, Penguins, and Red Wings.
Number 2, Roger Nielsen. The same man who was nicknamed Captain Video couldn't tell a calculator from a remote control and once identified a microwave as a television. Still, his grasp of the rules was second to none. He'd send out a defenseman to chase a player on a penalty shot, or he'd pull his goalies to have them leave their stick in the crease.
The closest Nielsen got to winning a Stanley Cup behind the bench was as the little-known video analyst for the 1983-84 Edmonton Oilers, who won their first cup that season. As a coach, he led 8 different NHL teams in over 25 years.
Number 1, Mike Keenan. A former teacher at Forest Hill Collegiate in Toronto, Mike Keenan got one of his first coaching gigs with the high school girls swim team. Known as Iron Mike, his players sometimes had less than flattering things to say about him. Keenan spent time with the Flyers, Blackhawks, the Rangers, where he won a cup in '94, the Blues, Canucks, Bruins, Panthers, and Flames.
Keenan is the only coach to win both the KHL title and the Stanley Cup. The GM of Metallurg Magnitogorsk said of Keenan that from all the Canadian coaches, he's the most Russian. Forever enigmatic, Keenan says it best: it's better to understand than be understood.
Full disclosure, Mike Keenan used to work at Sportsnet. One night, they tell Ivanka and I, Mike Keenan's going to come down on set with you guys, and you can do a little chat with him. We were terrified.
Yeah, but he was a softie.
He was the nicest guy.
Bear. He was also a bit of a fashionista. Showed up looking pretty Rico Suave, right?
Iron Mike, good-looking dude. And don't forget, he's won a title in the KHL as well. The man knows how to win.
That's true. Okay, if you'd like to chime in on our countdown, this is where we encourage you to do so. Tweet away and use the hashtag SNCountdown.
That is it for this edition of Sportsnet Countdown. I'm Ken Reed.
And I'm Ivanka Osnak. See you next time.